Welcome to the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show, and today we are going to be taking a look at our rest of season quarterback rankings. And this is an interesting one because it's about not where maybe we see a quarterback for week 3 or where we saw them before the season, but where we want to rank these guys throughout the rest of the season, where we see their trade value at, their start sit value, maybe guys you want to get off waivers, quarterbacks you want to stash, strength of schedule, things that we could just see changing as the season goes on. And today, as always, I've got Dave Kluge with me. I'm Alfredo Brown, and we've got our special guest with us, Jeffrey Bell from the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Jeff, I had to go full name on you. I'm sorry.
You're okay. It's you and my mother, Alfredo, are the only two that would do that, but I appreciate that love.
Alfredo's the only person besides my mother that calls me David, so at least we've got that in common, Jeff.
I like to think that I'm the mother of football guys. Is that not what my vibe is over here?
I think Barbara's the mother of football guys, but
yes.
I understand where you're going there.
That's fair. That's fair. All right, so today what we're going to do is we're going to go through our rankings and tiers for our quarterbacks rest of season here. And fellas, we're going to start at number 25, where we've got Deshaun Watson, quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. And I don't know how much we can really say here. He started off with a really rough week 1, week 2 looking a little bit better. But the Browns overall just look like a really struggling team. Jeff, you're out there in Cleveland. The vibes kind of just, well, okay, let's do an Alfredo thing. The vibes for the Browns seem poopy when I say it.
Yeah, I'm very much not in Cleveland. I'm in Columbus, very two different places. But I understand.
Did I say Cleveland? I meant to say Ohio. My bad. I meant to say Ohio.
You're down there in Tampa, so I get it. So going on here, but I think it's when you look at what they were able to accomplish last year with Joe Flacco and then kind of the build of the team, they basically have tried to take the ball out of Deshaun Watson's hands as much as possible. He kind of saved his week this week with a rushing touchdown, but outside of that, they got blown out week 1 when they kind of tried to run their normal offense.
It is wild how stagnant his rushing output has been throughout his career, because I was like, maybe he's rushing a little bit more, and he is a little bit more than last year, but dating back to 2019, he's been between 23.7 and 29.5 rushing yards per game in every single season. He's at the high end this year with 29.5, so I think that could be where people who drafted Deshaun Watson, whether it be in 2 quarterback or super flex leagues, can kind of get bailed out a little bit, is that he's rushing more, and he's rushing more effectively than he did last year. It's kind of surprising that he's a QB 12 on the season right now, because what you watch when you see Deshaun Watson is not a good quarterback, and then somehow he just gives you a QB 9 finish in week 2, and it's like, well, I don't know how that happened. And I think you might get a lot of those because he does have that kind of sneaky rushing upside where he's padding his floor every single week. So I'm not ready to move him, much higher than we have him right now, but in 2 quarterback and super flex leagues, Watson makes a pretty nice option to plug in every single week.
So after that, at number 24, we've got Kirk Cousins, and peek behind the curtain here. We're actually recording this as the Eagles-Falcons game is going on. So if at any point you see me not looking directly at the camera or not paying attention to what Dave and Jeff are saying, it's probably because I'm watching the game. So this ranking, we could look really stupid, look like a lot of egg on our face if we have Kirk Cousins here at number 24, and it's just another bomb of a performance from him. And I think a lot of the concerns after week 1 was that he just didn't look the same. And shocker, quarterbacks that are old, that are coming off Achilles injuries, are going to struggle. So, fellas, what do we do with these Falcons players if Kirk Cousins just isn't back to normal? Dave, I'll start with you.
It's so hard to have a take on the Falcons right now with the game going on because we're still looking at week 1, and this game, or the show, is going to come out tomorrow morning. And, I don't want to look foolish for being too high or too low on Kirk Cousins, but what we saw week 1 was definitely concerning. There was no mobility whatsoever. The offensive line wasn't doing him any favors, and we didn't see the target volume that we wanted going to Drake London. Kyle Pitts was able to save his day with a touchdown, and I think we'll see a lot of that where these guys will occasionally catch touchdowns and they'll pay off for you on any given week. But I talked a lot about it this offseason, that I think Drake London is more of a wide receiver 2, and people were drafting him with the hopes that he could take that step forward and become an elite wide receiver 1. I just don't see that in his game. But of course, we're recording this now, and he's going to go for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns tonight, and everyone in the YouTube comments is going to call me an idiot tomorrow morning.
That's kind of the tier.
We're going to do that.
That's kind of the
Sorry,
state
Jeff.
that we're operating in, though, right now. We're kind of operating, to be behind the curtain a little bit. Obviously, we started with Deshaun Watson, now to Kirk Cousins, kind of a tier of uncertainty around these quarterbacks. And looking below, we didn't mention anybody below because it's kind of hard to go below quarterback 25, given the quarterback play that we're seeing across the league and fantasy production across the league. So, it's just, it's hard to move them down any lower than kind of where you're dealing with right now. But if those Falcons, those offensive pieces that you do mention, hopefully we get some Michael Cousins if it does get, or not Michael Cousins, but Michael Penix Jr. if it does get that bad.
And the other thing too is like we're doing this on such a limited, like we don't have all of the information. We want to hold on to our pre-draft rankings and takes at some point while also adapting to what we saw in week one. Like if we were just basing this off of week one and week two, Daniel Jones would probably be ahead of Kirk Cousins and Gardner Minshew would probably be ahead of Kirk Cousins, but we still are holding on to some hope, hoping that week one game where the Atlanta Falcons offense looked terrible was just kind of a speed bump in what could be an otherwise good season.
Yeah, something I want to point out, really interesting figures here from Steve Palazzolo over on Twitter, who mentions that passing touchdowns through 2 weeks are the lowest it's been in the NFL in years. You go back and right now it's at 66 passing touchdowns with Monday Night Football pending. That's already 20 less than last season, nearly 40 or over 40 from 2 seasons ago. We are just, the league is already looking very different. And a lot of that has just been kind of the Patrick Mahomes effect and then the Tyreek Hill effect and putting 2 safeties over the top and just trying to take away big plays. And we're seeing a lot of short stuff and a lot more runs and a lot of dump offs to running backs. And a lot of these quarterbacks who have been pocket passers and have made their value there, at least early on, the vibe is that we're not seeing as much of it. And offensive playmakers, or excuse me, offensive play callers have to get a little more creative. Dave, I want to go to you on this one. Caleb Williams, we've got him at number 23. And this was a guy I think we expected to be a little bit higher. We didn't expect him to have as many of the rookie bumps and bruises early on in his career and have a little bit more of the upside rushing the football. Where are you at with Caleb?
I mean, I'm definitely not panicking on a prospect like Caleb Williams 2 games into his NFL career, but I was telling people to kind of pump the brakes a little bit. We know that you don't want to get too overexcited about rookies. I think CJ Stroud set the bar so high last year that now people are coming to expect that, and anything short of a record-breaking rookie season, people are just going to start throwing the word bust around because that's how people are on social media, very overreactive. I'm not panicking yet. What I saw from Caleb Williams was a terrible week 1 and a kind of bad week 2, but there was improvement. And there's got to be some silver lining there that he looked better in week 2 than he did in week 1. So I'm certainly not panicking yet. My ranking right now, my rest of season ranking is a little bit lower than my draft ranking because it's impossible to ignore what we saw. The rushing has been there a little bit, but definitely not as much as I expected. Still holding on to him. I think that, by the midway point in the season, end of the season, he might be a guy we're looking at as kind of a streaming QB1 option, but doesn't belong anywhere near a starting lineup right now.
Yeah. So what I want to notice here is that he actually had, 2, can we call them tough matchups in his first couple weeks? I think it's reasonable to not be panicking right now. Jeff, you were going to say something about Caleb.
No, I was just going to say that I think when you compare him to Jayden Daniels, we're seeing Daniels make plays downfield with his legs. And Caleb Williams is has the ability to be elusive, but he also looks downfield. He looks to get rid of the ball. And so he ran into a lot of trouble doing that last night against the Texans when he was creating plays, scrambling out of pressure, throwing the ball up, and it was getting intercepted quite often. And so that's where that lack of offensive line, I think, is a big problem for Chicago there, and they're not getting, you compare him to Jayden Daniels, they're not getting the run game support that Daniels is, the way that Brian Robinson Jr. is running, and even Austin Eckler over there. So you're kind of putting a lot more, I think, on Caleb Williams than what is kind of landing on Jayden Daniels' shoulders right now.
Yeah, it's with these rookie quarterbacks. I think you're right saying there's an unfair precedent that's been set with CJ Stroud, and we did the same thing with Justin Herbert after his rookie season as well, where we just expected rookie quarterbacks every single year to just have it and hit the ground running. Especially when we all just throw around generational prospect every time the draft comes around. It doesn't do these guys any favors.
The last thing I want to say in regards to Caleb Williams, because Jeff, you mentioned it, like him staying in the pocket, and again, trying to find the silver lining here. He almost did it to a detriment of himself, but that was one of his biggest weaknesses in college was abandoning the play too early and trying to make something happen with his legs or trying to get outside of the pocket and make something happen on the run. And yesterday, they talked about that throughout training camp, that one of the biggest points of emphasis for Caleb Williams was getting him to develop and learn to stay in the pocket and step up in the pocket, rather than just trying to scramble for his life every single time the pocket broke down. And like I said, we saw that yesterday almost too much, where there were times that I wish he would have taken off and bounced outside of the pocket. But it's good to know that he's at least taking the advice from the coaching staff and staying in the pocket, even when it's just chaos and breaking down all around him.
All right, let's go to the final two quarterbacks in this tier. At 22 and at 21, we've got Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers. And guys, we kind of been joking about this. The fantasy football is a game of attrition, and injuries just affect this game so much. And you've got Aaron Rodgers, who missed basically all of last season, minus a couple plays, coming back off of injury. Matthew Stafford, who has now essentially lost his entire offense to injury, with injuries to Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, every single offensive line starter, essentially. No Tyler Higbee there either. Are we just kind of expecting these guys to still be good because they've been good for years? I kind of look at this and almost feel like we're doing the same thing we did with wide receivers, where we found a tier and we said, okay, we'll just fit these guys in here. But I don't really know how much upside there is left with these guys, Rodgers and Stafford, if there's not going to be a rushing floor with them. We have to really expect them to do a lot with not a lot around them, or at least in Rodgers' case, an offense that just hasn't looked very good. Jeff, what are your thoughts on this one?
It's difficult because we led the show off. We led the show off talking about, you had pulled a great stat at the beginning of the show, talking about the disparity in passing touchdowns. And if you're looking at the position as a whole being down in general, then you feel a little bit better about an Aaron Rodgers that might not have a rushing floor, but does have a Garrett Wilson, does have a Breece Hall, and has the potential to at least be a passable quarterback in a landscape of just utter chaos. And so I believe it was Ryan McDowell had brought up something, and he basically said this was the first time. Actually, no, it was JJ in his data dump. JJ Zacharyson in his data dump said that this was the first time where there are only two quarterbacks with 20 points per game or 20 points scored in a week since some other random time. That tells you how bad week 2 was, and there was no buys. And so we're not even dealing with a lower floor there. So that's where I rely a little bit more on a trusted player like Rodgers, probably. I think the offensive line is still an issue with the Jets, and that contributed to what we saw last week against the 49ers, and then what we saw the other day against the Titans kind of limited that. But the ability to go downfield isn't quite there. But no quarterbacks can go downfield.
Yeah, the nice thing is when you're Aaron Rodgers, you don't have to go downfield. You can just throw the ball to Breece Hall in the flat, and he'll make it into a 40, 50-yard run. So he's got that going for him. I think Aaron Rodgers definitely isn't the player that we've seen in the past. And, between Stafford and Rodgers right now, I'm going to have a very slight preference to Stafford because he looks a little bit healthier, but without any of his weapons, he's a scary guy too. So I get what you're saying, Jeff, that you could get some stability here potentially, but I'm typically passing over these guys for the guys that we're going to be talking about in the next tier, who I think have that higher ceiling that we're just not going to see the ceiling from Rodgers and Stafford at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that these guys are outside of our top 20. I mean, it's just we can just be pretty cut and dry about it. By the way, did you guys see Breece Hall after getting that amazing touchdown catch? He got called for a drug test.
Did he? Yep, that's how it goes.
Amazing.
But
amazing. He tweeted that.
I do think today. Yeah, when you're talking about this tier, I mean, you talked about Daniel Jones, how he would be ranked because he played the Commanders. And kind of when you're operating within this tier, unless you're in a super flex or a deeper league, you're just going to be streaming into matchups anyways. And so that's the biggest thing kind of. And I think even more so this year than maybe we see in the past, especially a matchup like the Commanders, you're just going to want to target those matchups.
All right, let's go into our next tier. This is going to be tier number 4. And at 20 and 19, we've got two guys that are, I guess we can call them similar. They've been mentioned a lot of the same breath throughout their career here, but Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence, both the golden boys on their team and guys that have become the faces of their franchises. And we've got them at 20 and 19 respectively, with Lawrence just ahead of Herbert. And Jeff, you and I have Trevor Lawrence ahead of Herbert, whereas Dave, you have that flip-flopped. So let's talk about it really quick. Jeff, I'd love to hear from you why you have Lawrence ahead of Herbert. Dave, from you, why you have Herbert ahead of Lawrence. Dave, we'll start with you.
I just think Herbert's a better player, and I think the surroundings for Trevor Lawrence are a little bit better. But we've been waiting to see Trevor Lawrence break out for years, and he's been good. No doubt about it. Like, you watch the film, he's a very good quarterback, but the production hasn't been there. And playing fantasy football is a game of numbers, and we want production. And sure, they're running a little bit more in Los Angeles now than they have in years past, and Justin Herbert doesn't have the same volume he does. But if I have to pick, at this point, once we get higher up into the tiers, then we can start really breaking it down. I mean, here I'm just kind of looking at talent, and I just think that Justin Herbert is a better quarterback than Trevor Lawrence, and it's just as simple as that for me.
Guys, I'm doing this live on air as I do often. As the coward I am, I'm changing my rankings right now. I'm putting.
Wow, my argument was that good, huh? Just saying, Trevor Lawrence isn't as good.
I just did something totally wrong, but yeah, I'm moving Justin Herbert ahead of Trevor Lawrence.
Really
Well, my question is this.
there.
Yeah, no, you phenomenal argument. You should have been a lawyer. My question is this: to the naked eye, like, have we actually proven that Trevor Lawrence is really good at football and that he should be this franchise quarterback that the team is building around? Because I think that the common fan has looked at this and says, well, they've gotten to the playoffs. He's had a few big games here and there, but for the most part, there's not much difference between Trevor Lawrence and every other quarterback that's struggling on their team right now and hasn't really declared themselves the full-time starter. Jeff, what's the argument for Trevor Lawrence as still being a good quarterback in the NFL?
Well, we've seen production, specifically, we've seen production in this scheme that he's in right now. I think do have concerns on Lawrence about their offensive line and the ability to protect him. He is the most sacked quarterback, or the highest sack rate per pass attempt in the league right now. And so that definitely is concerning. But I think when you look at kind of the matching up, you talk about the Chargers are going to run a little bit more. The Chargers ran 44 times against the Panthers, and that was the most they've run in a game since 2020 against the Chiefs. They had an overtime game that they ran 44 times. So yes, they're going to run the ball a lot more. And some of that certainly game script with Carolina, but I think just some of that's exactly what they want to do. I am concerned about Justin Herbert making it through the season, to be blunt, because we saw him come in with the foot injury. He picked up another injury yesterday. He is running a little bit more than he has in the past, and he's taking a toll. It's taking a toll on him. And so that's where I probably have a little bit more concern about him actually making it through the season versus Lawrence. And I think naturally they want to run the ball more with the Chargers, and their ideal game plan looks a little bit different than the Jaguars' ideal game plan.
Yeah, and you said, we saw it in this scheme last year before Trevor Lawrence got injured. He was pacing for almost 4,300 rushing yards, 4,300 passing yards, 400 rushing yards. So, I mean, he was doing it last year, and that's kind of when we were talking about him. Didn't really take like a huge elite step forward, but we were consistently talking about Trevor Lawrence as kind of a fringe starter, a QB1, QB2, streaming him in matchups, and I think that's where he could belong. But as far as hopes that we had, like when he was drafted, that he'd be able to take that huge step forward and be in the Mahomes, the Allen tier with the best of the best. I think at this point we can probably expect that isn't going to happen, but that doesn't mean that he can't be a well above average starting quarterback and a fringe starter in fantasy.
I'll just say this. Baker Mayfield has 5 times as many passing touchdowns right now as Trevor Lawrence. So take that for what you will. Let's go to our next player on here at number 18. Dave, I know your pants are already off because Justin Fields is the quarterback here. And you are highest on Fields. You have him at quarterback 17. Jeff, you've got him at 19. I've got him at 20. My concern is this. At what point does he lose a couple games in a row and the Steelers coaching staff, players, and fans all just turn on him and they go, we want Russ. And then they go, oh, crap, this isn't any better. And then it just goes back and forth. And maybe Fields becomes a starter once again. But I think that's the only thing that's holding me back from letting him be ranked higher as a fantasy quarterback, Dave.
So the fans might, but I don't think the players are going to get there. I mean, Justin Fields has been like the leader of every locker room that he has been in. Like, you heard all this stuff about. Well, dating back to college as well, and, he was in Chicago for a long time, and they brought in other superstars while he was there, and those superstars immediately rallied behind Justin Fields. You heard all the sound bites last year about DJ Moore not wanting to draft Caleb Williams because they thought Justin Fields was the guy. I mean, he is a player's player. Like,
Okay,
everything
so then
he is.
moving past locker room stuff, if the players like him, what happens when they start losing? Like how realistic is it that he loses the job if the team starts losing games?
I mean, sure, it's possible, and any quarterback can lose games and lose their job. But with this defense and the mistake-free football that he has been playing, I mean that's been the theme of his career. Have been sacks and turnovers, and he hasn't turned the ball over yet, and he has the lowest sack rate of his career. Like, Arthur Smith is building a game plan around Justin Fields. And in Chicago, they tried for years to fit a square peg into a round hole and make Justin Fields be something that he wasn't. And now he has an offensive coordinator that is game planning around his skill sets. And the rushing has been there. The rushing opportunities have been there. The design runs have been there. The rushing production hasn't. But we know that it's only a matter of time before Fields returns to the player that we saw in Chicago, where he's ripping off 40, 50, 60-yard touchdowns. And once he starts getting some of those and we see those spike weeks, I think everybody's going to be way back in on Justin Fields. I feel like if you look at the box scores for Justin Fields, it's not telling the full story. He had a touchdown called back yesterday. He had a beautiful 50-yard pass to George Pickens that was called back as well. He's been this close to having that breakout performance, and we haven't seen it yet. But I feel like it's right there on the precipice. It could happen next week. It could happen 2 weeks from now. But Justin Fields is going to have one of those 35-point games where we all go, oh, yeah, we forgot Justin Fields can do that. And then we start talking about him as a weekly top 10 guy. I'm not ready to put him up there yet because we haven't seen it, but I know it's only a matter of time.
I think that's the biggest question on Fields on ranking him higher instead of ranking him lower. I almost don't know that you can rank him any lower relative to some of the players that we've already talked about. And you talk about when those losses are going to come. Looking at the schedule, I mean, Chargers, Colts, Cowboys, Raiders, Giants, Jets, Commanders. I mean, those are winnable games for what the Steelers are putting out there. And so that's my question. Might be, is Russell Wilson going to be on the team when the supposed losses come? Because is Russell Wilson, if this team, they've got a big matchup this week against the Chargers, which feels shocking to say it's a big matchup, but 2-0 teams going up against each other for their first loss. So yeah, that sets up pretty big, and they win that game, they're 3-0. And so if Justin Fields solidifies himself over the first half of this season, is Russell Wilson going to be happy just burning an entire year sitting on the bench behind him, or are they going to explore looking for options on either recouping draft capital to trade Russell Wilson or allowing him to just walk and go into the situation that Russell Wilson wants to go into?
Long way of saying, Alfredo, you might be getting a Russell Wilson Miami Dolphins jersey pretty soon.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Honestly, I don't think they're trading Russ. I think he's just going to end up staying there, and they're going to hold on to both quarterbacks just as an insurance policy. But I mean, Dave, we talked about this when the Russell Wilson injury was announced and that Justin Fields had the possibility of being the starter there in Pittsburgh, where we said whoever takes over, there's a chance that they go into the bye week 7-1, potentially even 8-0. I mean, you look at the schedule coming up. So they've already played Atlanta and Denver. They get the Chargers, Colts, Cowboys, who, I mean, they looked very beatable against the Saints, but granted, the Saints are on I don't know what they're on. Yeah, sure, on fire. I was going to say something much worse that they were on. They get the Las Vegas Raiders, New York Jets, and then New York Giants heading into the bye. And they come out of the bye against the Washington Commanders, so they get an extra week to prepare for the Commanders. So there's like a very realistic thing here where we're looking at this team and saying that they are, I mean, like a top of their division coming out of the bye going into week 10 as they get ready for Baltimore in week 11. That's kind of nuts to say. So yeah, I mean, something to consider.
I think if Justin Fields leads this team to 6-2, like you're talking about, those first 8 weeks are kind of soft for them. If he leads this team to 6-2, he's starting through week 17, barring injury. There's no way that they're going to bench him if he gets off to that sort of start this season. The team will rally behind him. The fans will rally behind him, and he'll be the starter for the rest of the season.
And their schedule is a little bit backloaded there. I mean, they do play the Chiefs, Ravens twice, Eagles, Bengals twice in the back half of that schedule. So I think the league probably looks at the Steelers as a team that they wouldn't mind being pretty good because the Steelers have pretty strong support, and you're lining up some potential TV matchups there for a team that made the playoffs last year. So I think it sets up very well for Fields to have solidified himself as their franchise quote-unquote quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Guys, I'm going to say the quiet part out loud and say This is kind of stupid of us. We've spent roughly 20 minutes here on quarterbacks that a lot of people don't even roster. So let's get into the good stuff, because after this, we got, I can't believe I said, let's get into the good stuff. And I go, let's talk about Sam Darnold, because we got Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold, guys here that are ranked 16 and 17 for us. But I mean, that NFL MVP race is heating up. Sam Darnold third in the NFL right now in passing touchdowns, not in MVP odds. Don't look that up right now, please. But he's third in the NFL in passing touchdowns. And I kind of want to ask here, does the Cinderella story keep going, or does he turn into a pumpkin? We've seen this before where Kevin O'Connell, he can make quarterbacks just look good. Nick Mullins was a top 12 quarterback in 2 of his 3 starts last year. Josh Dobbs looked good. And it almost kind of seems like it doesn't matter if Justin Jefferson or Jordan Addison or TJ Hawkinson are on the field, the offense just moves the ball.
You need Justin Jefferson and you got Jalen Naylor.
Exactly. Yeah. Who needs him? Who needs him? So, Jeff, between Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold here, who would you rather have rest of season? I cannot believe we're asking this because the Niners offense is just so good, but now they've got injuries with Deebo Samuel, CMC. So where are you going here?
I'm still going to go with Brock Purdy. I think that there were comments. He gave comments talking about Brian Flores' scheme yesterday against the Vikings and basically said, your scheme's crazy, dude. I think it was just a kind of one of those things. The Vikings defense is on fire right now, and they caught the 49ers at a weak spot. And I'm still definitely going to go Brock Purdy. We've just seen it more than Sam Darnold. And I do believe that Kevin O'Connell is a very, very good coach. And that kind of speaks to maybe this tier, or maybe these players in general, the difference between strong, excellent coaching in the NFL versus, well, not. And yeah, I think Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold are both in great situations with great coaches.
Yeah, I feel like it's just two sides of the same coin in a weird way. Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold, like guys who are just surrounded by really good playmakers with really good coaching. And that's why, as crazy as it sounds right now, I've got a slight preference towards Sam Darnold because his playmakers are healthy and Debo is hurt and McCaffrey is hurt and Brandon Ayuk seems checked out and George Kittle is hurt. And Brock Purdy's looked really good for the last couple of years, but how good is he going to look when he's got Ross Dwelly starting at tight end and Jordan Mason is their RB1 and Juwan Jennings is their wide receiver 1? It's going to be a very different team, and we could be looking at that for the next month or so. So crazy as it sounds, I'm going to lead towards Sam Darnold right now.
And Justin Jefferson is hurt, and Jordan Addison is hurt, and TJ Hawkinson is hurt. And yeah,
Justin Jefferson, they said day to day, they said it was just a bruise and he should come back. And that's the thing, like we saw what Justin Jefferson did on a 97-yard touchdown. The 49ers just don't have anybody around their offense right now that can do that. And Jordan Addison should be back, they're saying, as early as week 3. TJ Hawkinson should be back in a few weeks as well. And Sam Darnold has been doing this without those guys to start the season. So I know it's crazy, but we've seen what this system can do for quarterbacks, and it seems like it's doing that for Sam Darnold right now.
Yeah, put that in your pipe and smoke it, Jeff. Sam Darnold over Brock Purdy. We're in full week 3 form. This is so stupid. Let's keep going here.
We can just skip over Jordan Love. We don't need to talk about him that much because it's all injury dependent.
I think you guys discounted him way too much, to be honest. I mean,
that was going to be my question here is, what does the manager do? Let's say you don't have an IR spot. Do you hold on to Jordan Love and keep him on your bench because you want him 4 or 5 weeks from now? If you have a deep enough bench, Jordan Love was a guy that we were ranking in our top 12. Are you just letting him go by the wayside and picking up a Justin Fields, a Trevor Lawrence, a Justin Herbert maybe, and not knowing how good they're going to be? Or are you just waiting for Jordan Love to come back? Jeff, you seem to believe that we have him a little too discounted. I've got Jordan Love at 15. Dave, you basically hate Jordan Love and he's dead to you because he's quarterback 18.
Jeff, you go first.
Well, they didn't put him on IR, so that tells me that they're hoping within the next 4 games. 1 game's down already, so you're talking about 2 to 3 games. Are you talking about week 5, week 6? I mean, we're in week 3. That's not that far away. And I think when you talk about the landscape in general, Jordan Love has a ceiling to be a top 5 quarterback. He was a top 5 quarterback last year. And we saw the explosion with Jaden Reed in week 1, and we know these playmakers. Heck, this team can win a game with Malik Willis at quarterback. So yeah, and this is a situation that I want, especially relative to a league that half the quarterbacks don't feel usable. I mean, that's where I would lean towards holding Love a little bit more aggressively than maybe even a couple of years ago when we thought, you could get passable quarterback play from the quarterback 25, and you weren't praying for 185 passing yards and a rushing touchdown.
Yeah, see, with Love, I just he's in the same tier for me as so many other guys, Geno and Derek Carr and Sam Darnold and Brock Purdy, who we just talked about. So I think with Love, like I wouldn't want to hold on to him through this injury because I can just pick one of those guys off of waivers, and I don't think Love is in that territory where you feel confident just plugging him in for 17 weeks and not even thinking twice about it. He kind of falls into that streaming tier where you're playing him based on matchups, and that's just not a guy that I'm trying to hold for 2, 3, 4 weeks while he recovers from an injury.
Where did you rank Jordan Love 2 weeks ago relative to Sam Darnold and Geno Smith and Derek Carr?
I mean, you know the answer to that question. I had Jordan Love ahead of them, but we've seen 2 weeks of football now, and a lot of players are injured. And I mean, if
I'm need to pull up who the leaders through week 2 of 2023 were.
I mean, it's so many of the injuries that have moved players up. And like, you know, we Alfredo and I, we were quick last year to adjust on Baker Mayfield when we saw Baker Mayfield in this new Tampa Bay offense. And we said, we got to move this guy up the rankings because he's playing with good coaching. He's playing with good playmakers and he finishes a top 10 quarterback. So it's not so much that Jordan Love is doing anything wrong. It's that he's injured and other guys have played well that I would prefer ahead of him right now. And okay. I don't know. I don't think it's crazy to take a healthy Sam Darnold and a healthy Brock Purdy and a healthy Derek Carr, who are all playing really good football right now and scoring points over a guy who's going to be scoring 0 for the next few weeks.
I mean, so 1, we've learned Jeff wants to aggressively hold on to Love. And 2, Dave Kluge, let's go of Love. So take that for what you will. I think this, like, at least the way I look at it, and I think it's going to have to be measured on a team by team basis. Where are you at injury wise? How deep is your bench? There's how deep is your Love? There's a lot of things that go on. Sorry, that's my last Love joke. There's a lot of things that are going to go into this equation. The way I kind of look at it, and maybe it's just too simplified, is he going to be better than all those other quarterbacks we listed when he comes back? And to me, I think he is. I don't think that he is a matchup-based streamer. I think he's a guy that you can't just plug in every single week. That's how we were ranking him prior to this, and that's how I'll rank him when he comes back. It's a matter of, can your team actually hold on to him and handle that while he's out? If you're going to lose, if you've already lost 2 games and you're likely going to lose 3 more by keeping him on your bench, there has to be a guy on waivers that you're picking up that's worth dropping Jordan Love. And I think that's the biggest thing there is, are you dropping Jordan Love to go pick up a Carson Steele who you maybe start and he maybe gets you 6, 7, 8 points or falls in the end zone? It's the risk reward thing. You kind of have to weigh it out that way. Let's go to the final 2 quarterbacks in this tier. Derek Carr and Geno Smith, 2 guys who have come out dealing right now. And Derek Carr is tied for the lead in the NFL with 5 touchdown passes. Geno Smith and the Seahawks passing attack looked really good in week 2. Dave, we were talking about it in our panic meter show that week 1 didn't look quite so great. We kept that as a 1 on the panic meter. Weren't too worried. Week 2 came out, looked fantastic. So Geno and Derek Carr, if you're picking one for the rest of the year, there's another one where you and Jeff are flip-flopped. Jeff, you prefer Derek Carr. Dave, you prefer Geno Smith. Dave, I'm going to start with you on Geno Smith, why you're taking him over Derek Carr.
I mean, these guys are neck and neck for me. I can't
Sorry.
sit here on this show.
I love when you start like a talking point going,
I mean, you're asking me to like have a talking point and defend something that I just don't have a strong take over. Like, you know, right now, like when we had to rank these guys out, yeah, it's like 13 and 14, but like these guys are both pretty much neck and neck for me. Like, I don't have a strong take one over the other.
I ask it because I'm sure there are fantasy managers out there who maybe didn't draft a quarterback early, sat, drafted a couple guys late, and they picked up Geno Smith and Derek Carr, and then now they're having to make waiver wire decisions, maybe keep one over the other. There's always someone out there, right? So like that's the only reason why I say, why this guy over this guy? If not, why do we even do the show?
So, I mean, what I'll say is that Geno Smith, I think, is the safer option for the rest of the season because we've seen him finish inside the top 10 before. And we've seen him in this, well, not in this system, but we've seen him with this team at least for a few years. We know he's got good playmakers around him. But I think if what you're looking for is the ceiling, it might be crazy to say, but I think that Derek Carr is the higher ceiling here. Like, you look like he has been balling out in this Clint Kubiak offense, and we know that he's got good players there as well. And now they're using more motion, and they're using these receivers a little bit more creatively. Right now, Derek Carr is second in the league in EPA per dropback behind only Josh Allen. He's leading the league in completion percentage over expectation. Like, right now, he is exceeding any expectation that anybody had for Derek Carr, and it could be because of this new Clint Kubiak offense. So right now he's I believe he's second in the league in fantasy scoring. I don't think he's going to maintain that, but that just shows how high his ceiling could be in this new offense. So I think Geno is the safer play. You're more likely to get a top 12 season from Geno, but if you're looking for a guy that could really surprisingly finish inside the top 10, I think that Derek Carr's likelihood of doing that is higher than Geno's. I'm sorry, inside the top 5 is what I meant to say.
So I'll point this out. Just friendly reminder: Geno Smith has actually finished as a top 5 quarterback in fantasy. Derek Carr is not. I'll just keep throwing that out.
That's the first thing I said, Alfredo. You weren't listening to me. That's why
I
I said
know.
Geno's the
I
smarter
said
play.
friendly
He's done
reminder,
it.
not friendly new factoid that no one's ever said before, David. You pay attention. All right, Jeff, Derek Carr, you've got him at 2 spots ahead of Geno Smith as your quarterback 13. What makes you so Willie Nelson on Derek Carr?
So 15 possessions and 15 scoring drives. I think that there are times as an NFL fan when you just see the team is riding the lightning, basically. And I think that you look at the Clint Kubiak scheme coming in here, you look at where Alvin Kamara is in his career, you look at Chris Olave, you look at Rashid Shaheed breaking out. This is a situation where I think the Saints are just riding the lightning right now. And I think that we see so often this league is so fickle and things are so close so often in this league that when you get a team that believes in itself, that really is able to snowball and roll. I mean, I go back to when Kurt Warner came into the league, however many years ago, 20 plus years ago, and out of the blue, there was a brand new scheme that took the league by storm, got the ball to playmakers, and won a Super Bowl. And I don't know that the Saints with Derek Carr going to win the Super Bowl, but I'm just saying that coming out of week 2, I mean, the Saints are playing the best football in the league. I feel like I don't know who really is playing better than them right now.
Yeah, that's so weird to say it. The Saints are playing the best football
very
in the league.
weird.
By the way, as we say that, Jalen Hurts throws a touchdown here to Devontae Smith. So Skinny Batman reaping the benefits of AJ Brown out right now.
Alfredo,
Let's go to our...
This isn't a live show. Nobody is going to care on Tuesday afternoon that Devonta Smith caught a touchdown. I'm sorry. Thank you for filling me in.
He watches me and Matt do the Audible live and realizes that, I get it.
Dave,
we're doing different things.
I'm cutting that out of the audio. Nobody's hearing this.
No, you're not. You're not even going to find it. You're not even going to find it, Dave. We're like 45 minutes into this thing. Shut up. Anyways, next tier here. Let's go. Tier number 3. At number 12, we've got Jared Goff. At 11, Joe Burrow. At 10, Baker Mayfield. And at 9, Dak Prescott. This is one of the smaller tiers that we have here as we get a little bit closer to the top. We've got just 4 quarterbacks here, and this one kind of feels like it's very all over the board for us. There wasn't really a strong consensus when we got here, where Dave, your highest quarterback out of this group is Dak Prescott. Jeff, your highest quarterback out of this group is Baker Mayfield, and mine is Joe Burrow. I tended just to stay a little bit closer to where I was 2 weeks ago. Jeff, you're buying in on the Baker Mayfield stuff this year. I don't know how high you had him before the season, but you've got him at 9. So what makes you have so much confidence in Baker Mayfield here after 2 weeks? I know that looked fantastic, 5 touchdowns, but what makes you say that he's going to keep doing that as the season goes on?
Well, you grab teams a moment in time. I think that Baker Mayfield has gotten past the injuries, and outside of those injuries, I think he would still be the Browns quarterback, and he's gotten over that portion of his career. There's been a lot of talk about when he had to leave Cleveland. His wife even said that changed him as a person, that changed how he prepared, that changed his outlook on life, really. And he has carried that through now in really his second life as a franchise quarterback with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You've got Mike Evans, you've got Chris Godwin here, and all these players have high-end talent around them. But I think that when you look at the lack of running game from Tampa and really kind of make the same argument with Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow not having a running game, but that's where the Bucs have one very specific way they need to win football games, and it relies on Baker Mayfield and it relies on Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
I came across an interesting little factoid today dating back to the start of 2023, week 1 of the 2023 season last year. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Dak Prescott, and Jalen Hurts are the only quarterbacks with more fantasy points than Baker Mayfield. He is the QB5 in the cumulative points since week 1 of last year. It is kind of unbelievable. And I just wrote about Baker Mayfield as a guy trending up in my article. Now, again, I think we all play fantasy football a little bit differently. So I've talked about some of these other guys as kind of streaming options. I'm still looking at this tier, Baker Mayfield, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, as kind of streaming options. I don't want to plug any of them into my lineup for 17 weeks and ride the highs with the lows. I just kind of want to have one of these guys paired up with another guy, whether it be somebody below or whatever. But Baker Mayfield, I mean, he was a top 10 quarterback last year. It looks like he's on track to do it again this year. And those spike weeks are huge in Tampa Bay with that duo he has in Evans and Godwin. So I think we are all right to move him up the way that we had, and wouldn't surprise me if he's a top 10 quarterback again this year.
I think the biggest thing that I'm noticing right now for Baker Mayfield is this is already one of his best rushing seasons he's ever had, and that's been the big difference maker. I mean, obviously, there's the big boost. Week 1 going up against the Commanders, Week 2 against Detroit. It wasn't quite as great passing, but he had the rushing touchdown. He had that sweet move. Oh, it was just chef's kiss. It was beautiful. But I mean, we're looking at Baker Mayfield right now. He has never had more than 165 yards rushing, and after 2 weeks, he's already at 55. So this could end up being a career year for him rushing wise, and it might end up being the thing that kind of lifts his fantasy value and makes him just an easy top 12 quarterback. Dave, you've got Dak Prescott as your quarterback 9 here, highest in this group. What makes you keep Dak Prescott there still? I know there's going to be plenty of passing still in Dallas. He's got CeeDee Lamb, but what gives him the edge over guys like Burrow and Goff, who, similar things, high profile targets and lots of passing?
Just that Dak Prescott has finished as the overall QB1 before, and that's not something we've seen from anybody else in this tier. We've already seen the elite ceiling with Dak Prescott, and we're hoping to get the elite ceiling from Goff and Baker and Burrow and the other guys. But, historically, I'm willing to bet on a guy that we've seen do it before. He was the QB3 last year. He was the QB1 3 years ago. Has gotten off to a bit of a bumpy start so far, but you look at both those matchups against the Saints and the Browns. Neither of those were particularly easy defensive matchups, so I'm not wavering too much from where I had Dak in the preseason.
The guy that I have highest out of this group of 4 is Joe Burrow. And for me, a lot of it is just trying not to move my rankings too much after just 2 weeks. And also realize that the Bengals do this every year, it feels like, where they just start off really bad. There's always 1 or 2 players that are hurt. It causes the start to be really bad. They always have a rivalry game that comes out. It just looks ugly. They have a slow game. For Burrow, I think he bounced back in a big way in the second week. And I think Wristgate was done, or Water Bottle Gate, whatever we want to call it, is kind of, we've moved past it. But looking at the schedule going forward, and that's going to be the big thing, is like, now that we know a little bit more about these teams, we can actually implement strength of schedule and the matchups coming up. Next games for Joe Burrow and the Bengals, the Washington Commanders and the Carolina Panthers. There's going to be 2 big bounce back games there for Joe Burrow and the Bengals. When he gets T. Higgins back, I'm expecting this offense to be a lot better. And you just keep going down that list. We could see a potential shootout with Baltimore. You got the Giants in week 6. Cleveland is probably going to be their toughest matchup. Then another shootout with a bad secondary with Philly. Then Las Vegas, Baltimore again, the Chargers, and then a bye. And really in the playoffs is where it looks like it's going to get very, very tough for them, or closer, to the fantasy playoffs. Week 13 is where it looks like it's going to get tough for them. But Joe Burrow could be that guy that gets you there. So I think that's important to take a look at there. But there we go. At 12, it's Jared Goff. 11, Joe Burrow. 10, Baker Mayfield. And 9, Dak Prescott.
Guess who Baker Mayfield plays week 17 of the fantasy playoffs?
The Saints, right?
Ooh, no, Carolina Panthers.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Revenge game.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, that stretch from week 12 through 17. Giants, Panthers, Raiders, Chargers, Cowboys, Panthers. Baker Mayfield could be a league winner, folks. Just saying it. Good job, Jeff. Gold star for you. 5 points to the Dynasty Show for that one. All right, let's go to our next tier. At number 8, CJ Stroud. 7, Jayden Daniels. 6, Anthony Richardson. And number 5, cover your ears, Chiefs fans, Patrick Mahomes. Boys.
Now, in my opinion, these 8 are the only weekly starters that you're plugging in and not thinking twice about. I think anybody outside of these top 8, you want to have a secondary option that you can kind of rotate with matchups. Am I crazy for thinking that?
For me,
I don't think
Stroud
you're
is closer
crazy.
to the other tier than this tier, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can make that. I think you can make that argument for a couple of these guys. Like if it becomes a slippery slope. Like you almost start to say like Jayden Daniels against a really tough defense might not be startable, even despite the rushing upside. CJ Stroud, Jeff, I agree with you there. It all depends on what you're looking for. Some people are just always going to be going for upside. But let's talk about these guys. Right now, we all have the same guy at the top, and that's Patrick Mahomes. Then Anthony Richardson, we have at 6. Dave and I have him at 6. Jeff, you have him at 7. You have Jayden Daniels ahead of Anthony Richardson. And I think a lot of people might ask why. Mostly because these guys are both rushing quarterbacks. These guys both have, we could say, underwhelmed in the passing game so far early in the season. I think that we could probably venture to say the Colts might have a better offense, but what leads you to have Jayden Daniels ahead of Anthony Richardson, who, I mean, some people were ranking as high as quarterback 1 in the preseason?
I think when I look at what Daniels, they're both rushing quarterbacks, but they run in different ways. And Daniels is the type of player that can score an 80-yard touchdown by the defense just being out of position a little bit. I think Richardson definitely has the explosion, but he's a little bit more
He's a volume runner.
Contact. He's a little bit more of a volume runner. Like he's kind of an evolutionary Jalen Hurts versus, I guess maybe that might be a good way to describe it. Like an evolutionary Jalen Hurts versus an evolutionary Lamar Jackson. And like, I just
Like
think
a Pokemon?
if you, yes, exactly.
Sorry,
But
Dave.
I think that's where
Richardson
to
is
me,
the Charmander or the Charmeleon.
and I
I'm
think
sorry.
that what
Sorry.
their offense requires them to do, how terrible the Commanders' defense is, but also what their offense asks of them, lends a little bit more to fantasy points for Jayden Daniels than it does for Anthony Richardson.
That's fair. I think that's pretty good. I haven't heard anybody really spin it that way, Jeff, but I think you make a really good point. For me, it's the designed rushes for Anthony Richardson. I mean, he's getting 8 to 12 designed rushes. It seems like every single time he takes the field, and that obviously does bump up his injury risk a little bit. He's a guy who, as you said, likes to seek out contact and take those big hits. But just the way that they play, where they kind of, it seems like every single rush, whether it's Anthony Richardson or Jonathan Taylor, is just kind of setting up for the big play. And we haven't seen those big passing plays from Jayden Daniels yet. That's kind of what I like about Richardson, is we have seen the big passing plays come to fruition. Haven't seen that from Daniels, but these guys are so close to me. I mean, both of them have any given week the ceiling of being that week's QB1.
If you need a refresher on why rushing matters so much for quarterbacks, Jayden Daniels, 0 passing touchdowns through 2 weeks, and he's the quarterback 5. So
how about Anthony Richardson? I believe he was a QB2 in week 1 with 9 pass attempts, I think.
Yeah. It was the QB4, and Jayden Daniels was the QB3 in week 1.
Yeah. Welcome to fantasy football. Mm-hmm. So much fun. Also, by the way, sleeper list, Jayden Daniels is 210 pounds. I'm going to take the under. I don't know what you guys.
Definitely. Yeah.
He's lithe. He's a slender man out there.
All right, let's go to our final tier here. These are the guys that we might call them elite, so to speak. At number 4, got Lamar Jackson. At 3, Kyler Murray. At 2, Jalen Hurts. And at 1, Josh Allen. And Jeff, your rankings are almost the inverse of Dave and I. And we've been doing our show too long together because we have the exact same rankings here with Allen at 1, Hurts at 2, Murray at 3, Lamar at 4. Jeff, you've got Kyler Murray at 1, which, I mean, Dave and I thought we were high on him, having him at quarterback 5 in the preseason, now up to quarterback 3. You're at quarterback 1. Let's talk about this because it was a very different Kyler Murray from week 1 to week 2. I think we were all very impressed. Is that just a preview of things to come? Is it an overreaction? I mean, for you, it seems like not. You've got him as your top quarterback.
Well, they played, Alfredo, I don't want to bring up bad memories here, but how did the Dolphins offense look in the first half against the Bills?
Let's just say these were different games. Wasn't there a really bad wind going on in the Buffalo Arizona game in week 1? Yeah.
Well,
and Kyler Murray didn't throw the ball past 10 yards. Yeah. Let's not personally attack each other here, Jeff. Okay,
the Dolphins
do it.
are a pretty explosive offense, and they didn't have much moving in the first half against Buffalo. And we'll not talk about what happened in the second half. I don't think it's fair to judge there. That's where I think they had a very difficult matchup week 1 for the Cardinals, and the Bills' defense is better than, frankly, I expected it to be, and it showed up against in the second half against Arizona. Maybe took a minute to get its legs underneath it, but then it rolled through Miami pretty easily, and so that's where I kind of write off that week 1 matchup as playing maybe one of the better defenses in the league. And week 2, he just absolutely decimated a Rams defense that is not one of the better defenses in the league. I think that, and some of that plays into the ranking when you're looking at where I'm ranking Josh Allen relative to where you guys have them ranked, because the Bills have trended a little bit more towards the rush game since Joe Brady took over, and we're seeing that. And obviously Josh Allen has historically destroyed the Miami Dolphins, and he had one of his worst fantasy weeks ever in week 2. And so that's where, if the game script allows for it, the Bills are more than content to run the ball and beat teams with defense and kind of take things off Josh Allen's plate. Whereas I don't see the Cardinals having that option. I think that their defense is not going to stop much of anybody. We saw the explosion with Marvin Harrison that we were finally hoping to see. We're seeing Kyler Murray. The rushing is back in his game, about 60 yards in week 2. So that's back. And I just think you're going to get into a lot of shootouts. And Kyler Murray was a player I was a little bit behind consensus coming into the season, but I do think it sets up very, very well for him to be in shootouts with weapons, probably better than weapons in what he's had in his career.
Yeah, I think that
definitely better coaching than he's had in his career.
Yeah, I don't think he could get much worse than what he had with Kingsbury. But I think the Bills, for me, it's tough to read too much into that Thursday night game because it was coming on a short week in Miami. There was just something off with their entire game. I think the team was a little shell shocked after the Tua injury, but even before that, they were just not getting the ball to their playmakers. They were just feeding Devon Achane and just leaving Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle out to dry. It was just a weird game overall. But the reason I'm still steadfast in my Josh Allen QB1 take is because of what we saw week 1, which was the Josh Allen of old, except that he was almost rushing more than normal because of a lack of weapons now when we saw him start to distribute the ball a little bit more on that Thursday game against Miami. But week 1 Josh Allen, I mean, that's the Josh Allen that just vintage Josh Allen that can break fantasy football. And I think that we're going to see more games like that than we will than we did the game against Miami.
Yeah, I think we haven't quite seen a normal Buffalo Bills game yet.
Right.
I got it. The first game was just odd. Week 1 sucked for everybody. There's the whole wind thing. Maybe I'm blowing that out of proportion, pun intended. And then week 2 with Miami, there's all the defensive touchdowns and the weirdness with Tua and all that. So I think we haven't quite gotten the full picture on these guys. And that's why, Dave, I think you and I are not ready to quite move these guys too much, unless, of course, it's Kyler Murray and it just agrees with our priors and we move them up. That's how that works. Well, we did it. We went through 25 quarterbacks here and went through our rest of season rankings. We're going to be back again tomorrow to go through our trade targets to buy before week 3. And then on Thursday, we're back again with our starts and sleepers for the week. I want to remind you guys, please make sure you are subscribed to the Football Guys Dynasty YouTube channel and the Dynasty show on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It's an awesome show. If you haven't played Dynasty, it's a great way to get into it, start listening, pick up on those strategies and those techniques, and get that introduction into a whole new form of fantasy football. Jeff Bell is there with other friend of the show and our coworker here, Jagger May. Dave, this was good. This was good. Almost great. Almost great. Maybe next time we're going to be great. We'll get into that tier 1. But as always, I want to thank everybody for watching and listening all the way through. For myself, for Dave, for Jeff, we'll see you next time. Adios.